Kansas needs Dix. We go deep dive on Josh Dix, the transfer from Iowa sharpshooter. Who is he visiting Kansas? Opportunity for Bill Self to close the deal this weekend.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on? Derek Johnson here. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for making it your first listen every day. Thank you to everydayers catching each and every episode of the show. We are free and available anywhere you get your podcasts, including on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. And on today's edition of LOJ, we are doing another deep dive on a portal target for KU basketball and Bill Self. That would be one Josh Dix, a transfer wing from Iowa. We're going to get into his game, his scouting report, strengths, questions of the game, how he would fit in with the Jayhawks, and where he falls on kind of the take meter, so to speak, for KU. First, this episode of the show is brought to you by 5-Hour Energy. Head to 5hourenergy.com to find over 15 flavors to choose from. Need one now? Grab a 5-Hour Energy shot at your local grocery or convenience store. Stock up today and stay energized with 5-Hour Energy. So Josh Dix, who is he? What would he bring to the table for whatever school he goes to? So first of all, he is a 6'6" wing, I guess you could call him. Now there's different iterations of wings, right? There's guys who can play the 2, 3, and 4. There's guys who can play the 2 and 3. There's guys who can play the 3 and the 4, right? I would classify Dix as more of like a 2-3 wing, right? You can play him as shooting guard or you can play him as small forward. 6'6", 210 pounds. He will be a senior at whatever his next school is, or it could be a return to his old school. I think Creighton is interested. I thought Kentucky was in on it. It seems like Iowa has an opportunity to bring him back with the new head coach, and obviously Kansas in there as well. So he averaged 14.4 points per game this past season at Iowa, 3.2 rebounds, 2.8 assists, which are good numbers for a wing, 0.9 steals per game, 0.5 blocks per game, and the shooting efficiency is what really sticks out here. 51% almost from the floor, 42% from three-point range. He did that on almost 5 3-point attempts per game. He also shot almost 77% at the foul line, though didn't get there a ton. 1.5 free throw attempts per game for Dix. But overall, the effective field goal percentage, really good. The true shooting percentage, over 61% for him, so that also good. Now, you look at some of the advanced metrics, the team on-off stuff. Team was not that much better with him on the floor offensively, but they were a little bit better. Team was a lot worse with him on the floor defensively. They were about 11 points per 100 possessions worse with him on the floor defensively. But, some of those numbers are, you have to take it with a grain of salt, because when you have a team like Iowa who just hasn't defended really under their current regime, it's hard to separate that from what happens with the rest of the team when you're out there for as many minutes as Dix is. So we're going to get into that as well as the strengths of his game here. But he really finished the season strong coming into the portal season. He had 8 straight games in double digits, and 6 of those 8 final games for Josh Dix at Iowa, he had 15 or more points, including 21 points in what was their final game in the Big Ten tournament, which capped off 3 games of 20 or more points from February 4th on. So there's also an argument to be made that this guy is getting even better, and he is playing his best basketball. And if he continues playing like that, it's another level from the guy you're getting on what are already good numbers over the course of the season for him. So you look at the strengths of Josh Dix, and obviously shooting. That is the one that comes to mind here. He is in the 92nd percentile nationally for true shooting percentage, 94th percentile for three-point percentage, 95th percentile for effective field goal percentage. And the crazy thing is he's doing all that without shooting super well on free throws. Again, 77% is a good number, but that's not like, a pristine number. If he was shooting 80, 85% at the free throw line, all of a sudden some of those numbers would go up even more. But good shooter from all over the court. He shot 43% on mid-range. That was the top quartet of college basketball. He shot 38% on above the break threes, so good from there in the wing area. And against top 50 teams, he also shot well on corner threes, which was a little bit lower volume, but insane 63% on corner threes for him there. But he has 68 games in his career now against KenPom top 100 opponents, and he shot 42% from 3 against those teams. In the, against KenPom top 50 teams, he has 46 games under his belt. And in those 46 games against top 50 opponents, that number down a little bit, but it's still 39%, which is really good. So he's played well against the best competition, so to speak. And you watch some of his game, he gets them off in a myriad of ways, right? It's not just always catch and shoot. He can do the occasional step back three. When you see him on film, he does have that nice little mid range coming off a curl, which we know, Bill Self likes to utilize toward that elbow area. I think he would excel there. Good at hitting those free throw line jumpers. So again, I think that would be a fit for him in the KU offense. He ranked in the 97th percentile for catch and shoot. So if you get him an elite creator, he is going to feast. Oh, hello, Kansas has Darryn Peterson committed, who is kind of this just elite creator who's going to have the ball in his hands. That's a nice player to have the opportunity to throw. Like, think about three-man actions that you could possibly have with Peterson getting a screen from Flory Bidunga. You have the lob action to Bidunga. You have the scoring option with Darryn Peterson. You have the passing option to the wing with Josh Dix based on what the defense does. That would be the idea there of, becoming this unstoppable trio between that. Now, all that said, what is interesting, a lot of times you see these guys who are snipers from three, they do have the ability as well to shoot from deep threes. That wasn't really the case, which is ironic because maybe the shot of the year for Josh Dix was like a game-winning, 30-foot three that he hit against Northwestern earlier on in the season. But overall on threes of 25 or more feet this year, he only shot 26.5%. So, which compared to short threes, under 25-foot threes, so basically your foot's to the line or right behind it, 47%, which tells you two things. Just tell him to shoot the short ones, but also not as much of a, Zeke Mayo could really launch it from deep. We've seen guys in the past. Sharon Collins was able to hit from really deep. Devontae Graham, there have been other guys who can really hit from deep. That's not as much Dix's game, but he's still just a lethal shooter, just from a little bit different usage there. Now, this is a guy who's low usage. He's low turnovers. He's high efficiency. And he doesn't turn the ball over much. Part of that's because of the role. If you're playing off ball, a lot of times you're not going to do that. But 97th percentile in turnover rate. Just overall really strong off-ball player. Now, if you build your team with, 4 or 5 off-ball players, you need somebody to create. But again, that's where you go back to the fact that Kansas has Darryn Peterson in tow. And in theory, they could add another combo guard, right? You got Marco Jackson on the roster that you could use somebody who's really good off the ball. So that's where a player like Josh Dix kind of becomes a perfect complement in a way to Darryn Peterson on the offensive side of the ball. And I don't want to say that, I don't want to make this seem like Dix can't play on the ball. He still can. He still can do things well on the ball. He can shoot threes on the ball. He can, pass a little bit on the ball. He can work off a pick and roll on the ball. He's just at his best, I think, when he is off the ball. And, he's able to take advantage of that too and turn it into easy cuts and open layups at the rim. He shot 70% at the rim. He shot 60% in the paint, which I think shows how good of touch he has, right? Those are the floater shots that he's able to hit. So, he can do a little bit of everything, but yeah, that's the kind of ideal situation you're looking for him in. And I will say he does have, because of the 6'6" length, you can get some dunks from him in transition. Overall, just a good transition player. 87th percentile for points per possession in transition. Now, where are the questions for Josh Dix's game in whatever school he winds up at next season? There is one thing, if you're looking at it and picking nits, it's always when you're on a team that's not winning as many games. Iowa didn't make the NCAA tournament, the last two teams. You have to look around and say, okay, well, who's at fault here? Did they not make it because of this guy? Was he a part of it? Or was he just surrounded by ineptitude? And in this case, I do think it's less about Dix. I think Dix can be a winning player. I think Dix, I don't blame for Iowa not making the NCAA tournament. I think it was more about the factors around him. But yeah, it obviously is something that you do have to, at the very least, keep in mind. And you look at those on-off defensive numbers, and that's kind of the big one that comes into play here. This is interesting. This was from a article about Iowa from the Iowa 24/7 Sports page. And it mentioned that Dix, his ideal position is the 2, but he can also play at 3 depending on the lineup. He's an elite shot maker, and that could really open things up again in McCollum's offense if they're to get him back. He also is a better defensive option than he gets credit for, and his versatility in hands on the defensive end could work in McCollum's system. Well, you know who else usually has a good defensive system that he's able to get, top 10, top 15, top 20 defenses over and over again? That would be one Mr. Self, Mr. William Self. And so I think that I would view Dix, especially in a role where, maybe you're getting even more off-ball reps playing next to Peterson, that I think you could take the defense to the next level, especially as a senior, where at the very least, I think he could work himself up to being just like a net neutral defender, right? Maybe he even ends up being an above average defender. And so I'm honestly not as much worried about it as I thought coming into this. He's got an 80th percentile block rate for his position. He does a great job of not fouling. And the fact of the matter is, like, when you look at Fran McCaffrey in his seasons at Iowa, he like just sucked at scheming defense or something. He unbelievable at scheming offense. Has had a lot of like top tier offenses. But since 2017, do you know how many top 50, that's not like a super high bar, top 50 defenses, according to Ken Palm, that Iowa's had since 2017? The correct answer is 0, right? What about top 70? Still 0. This is a Power 5 school. What about top 100? Only 3 since 2017, and 1 was ranked 97th. So maybe more of a coach than a player thing there, maybe more of a personnel around you than a player thing there. Certainly something to keep an eye on how the defense would translate, because that's something that's kind of a non-negotiable in a certain way for Bill Self. But honestly, I kind of blame the team context more than the individual there, that I think he'll be fine. The other question here is rebounding, only 9th percentile in offensive rebound rate, only 49th percentile in defensive rebound rate. More concerned with the defensive rebounding if Flory is your starting center and you have another big out there, because Flory better offensive rebounder than defensive rebounder. If you're using Dix at the 2, though, maybe it's not an issue. Maybe he gives you more as a rebounder at the 3 based on his role at KU. I don't know. That was something that you hoped for from Griffin and Store, and it didn't happen, so maybe not something you should wish cashed here. I think it would just mean that you have more emphasis to find a 4-man who gets a lot of rebounds for you. And then the last one here is for questions. Specifically with Dix, it doesn't solve KU's issue of getting to the free throw line. Dix is in the 10th percentile in free throw attempt rate. So you'd have to find other guys that can help you solve that. Maybe Peterson and Flory, if those two are in your starting 5, like maybe that's enough to kind of fix that on its own. All right, how would Josh Dix fit into the team? We discuss that next with Locked On Jayhawks. This episode of the show is brought to you by Nissan. We're all about the stats because numbers don't lie. And when it comes to the all-new Nissan Armada Pro 4X, the numbers are on an MVP level. With the ability to tow up to 8,500 pounds, it can quite literally carry the whole team, plus the gear, wherever you need to go. It's powered by a twin-turbo V6 engine, delivering the strength and performance to handle highways, back roads, and everything in between. And with room for up to 8 people, the Armada Pro 4X is built for big crews, big adventures, and even bigger memories. Whether you're exploring off-road trails or rolling up to the arena, the Armada Pro 4X brings power, versatility, and style wherever you go. Take your adventures to new heights in the all-new Nissan Armada Pro 4X. Learn more at nissanusa.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's 200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories, which I guess we don't really have at this point, and who's even cutting down the nets. You can take an eye on FanDuel, one of the teams to win the region. You can pick somebody to go to the final, get plus odds on one of those schools, or you can just bet the classics, the spread, the over-under for some of these games. Who do you think is going to win between Michigan State and Ole Miss? Who do you think is going to win the Auburn game against Michigan in a battle of kind of big man between the two teams? Visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you for joining us here on Locked On Jayhawks. Don't forget you can make Locked On College Basketball your second listen every day. Catch up with what's going on around the rest of the country, the transfer portal. Obviously, the postseason is still happening here, and maybe they'll be talking about Josh Dix at some point in time here. Okay, how would Dix fit into the team for KU? Well, he would be an awesome offensive complement, as I've kind of discussed with Darryn Peterson. With Peterson, you're looking at somebody who you can put on the same side as him. You can get him a skip pass for him. Having somebody who the defense has to really space out onto opens up the lane for Darryn Peterson. Heck, it opens up the lane for other players too, right? Like Marco Jackson, the idea of him, of what he could potentially be, is using his athleticism to be an elite driver of the basketball to the rim, right? Well, having a guy like that next to you certainly opens up the floor a little bit, right? If you're Flory Bidunga, avoid getting a double team because you do a same side action as Josh Dix. So yes, I mean, you could always say shooters fit in well. Now there is the part of, sure, you might be thinking, some people like, okay, well, didn't they think that's what they were going to get with Ryland Griffin? And how much of that? Yeah. I mean, I don't have an answer to that in a certain way of like, I do think to a certain standpoint, like at some point, it almost becomes a little bit of onus on the player. Bill Self kept Ryland Griffin in the starting lineup toward the end of the season. You know, sometimes it might be, I think I termed it like Charlie Moore syndrome. And I don't know if that was the case with Ryland or if there was something else going on or he just, hit a random funk. Sometimes guys just, aren't built for playing at Kansas, and that's okay. Sometimes you just need to be at a different school. Like Charlie Moore, he was a really good player at Miami. He was a solid player at Cal before Kansas, but he just couldn't figure it out at Kansas. And I don't know if it's the limelight. I don't know if it's the pressure on and off the court. I don't know what it is. Sometimes that can be the case, right? Maybe you switch it around and you end up having a better situation. Who knows, right? Maybe the system with Nate Oates is too big of a jump to come into a Bill Self. Who knows? That is obviously in the back of my head, though, too, where it's like, okay, you had this shooter. But you look at like Ryland Griffin, and one thing that I think is important is, well, Ryland struggled on the defensive end of the floor, and some of the metrics don't like Dix there. But again, if you're going into some of these scouting reports and people say that, no, he's better than he's being given credit for, does that give you hope that Dix can do a little bit more there? And I do think it's interesting because, even though the thought from, I think, a lot of KU fans sometimes is, okay, well, if this guy shoots and he doesn't do anything else, Bill Self's not going to play him. Well, you start to think about it a little bit more. And like, yes, there are situations like that where it's like Brandon Green, some games just isn't going to play or something like that. But you start thinking about it a little more. It's like, okay, you complain a lot about like Ryland Griffin, like, should he have played more? Should he have been given a longer leash with Bill Self? And I don't think those complaints kind of died down because of how the season ended for him and missing a lot of shots. But like Ryland Griffin played 20 minutes per game, and he started 20 games at Kansas, even though he didn't have a very good season, right? Up to par of what he was hoping to have, right? You look at like Gradey Dick and Johnny Furphy, two guys who, in the case of Furphy, by the time you get to January, and in the case of Gradey Dick, when the season began, both guys had their moments on defense. I think both guys showed flashes because they were long and they were athletic enough to where they would get the occasional steal or the big play. But both of them had some issues with off-ball defense at times. And in the case of Furphy, he had some issues when he would get switched on to a quicker player staying in front of him on the defensive end. But those guys played a lot of minutes for KU, and the trust was there. I think it comes down to this on the defensive end. Bill Self wants more of like, if you're making a mistake on the defensive end, he almost wants it more to be a lapse in a weird way than it is like an effort thing. And I don't know, because there were lapses for those guys, but also it's, can you impact the game in other ways? And here's the thing, like with Gradey Dick, he was getting rebounds. With Johnny Furphy, he was getting rebounds. So even if they had that mental lapse on the defensive end, he's going, okay, but they're shooting threes and they're getting rebounds. They're doing one other thing. With Griffin, it was, if you have the mental lapse on defense, what else are you providing besides your shooting in theory on the floor? Well, that becomes the question for Josh Dix. I do think Dix is a much better passer than Ryland Griffin. You look at some of the assist numbers, you're getting a little bit more there. I think you look at Dix as being maybe a better proven mid-range shooter. Now, part of that was probably system-based for Ryland Griffin. Didn't really get the opportunity to do it with Nate Oates. But yeah, the question would come down to the rebounding, which that is a question I have for Dix. How good of a rebounder can he be? And then you look at kind of the defensive end of the floor. So yes, those are real questions, but I feel like there's more meat to the bone with Dix in those areas that I'm not as worried at it. Maybe that's hindsight 2020. I don't know. But yeah, Kansas clearly needs more shooting. Kansas clearly needs to find a guy who can shoot and still be trusted to stay on the floor in those other ways. And the hope is that would be him. I think my KU comp here, if you were to throw one up, would be a hybrid of Gradey Dick and Isaiah Moss. Maybe that comes from, you have the hybrid of the white shooter and you have the hybrid of the guy from Iowa, right? It mixes perfectly. But I do think there's something there. Isaiah Moss was never a great defender. He was out there to space the floor. That's another guy who played a lot of minutes for KU, even though he wasn't a great defender. But he was at least able to like hold his own, and then be the floor spacer for KU. And I think Josh Dix is better than Isaiah Moss, right? He's a better overall player. He's a better overall scorer, comes in with more points and made shots and stuff like that. But I don't think he's quite as talented as a Gradey Dick. He's not maybe quite as athletic or as tall as a Gradey Dick. And so that's where you kind of end up, I think, between those two players. And I think that plays a very big role on Kansas here. So I think that's a very helpful player for Kansas to get to the point of where they want to go. I think it's a perfect role fit next to Darryn Peterson. And I think it's a perfect role fit to working the rest of the transfer portal for you because it allows you options of, okay, now we know at the 4, we want to get somebody who definitely is a good rebounder or something like that. So where does he fall on the take list? Is this a wait for somebody else? Is this a take right away? Let's discuss that next. This episode of the show is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Daylight savings snuck up on us again, and if you're feeling that lost hour of sleep, 5 Hour Energy has your back. The extra sunshine means more time for fun, but sometimes you need a little boost to power through. Whether you're staying up late watching the NCAA tournament, squeezing in or out of golf after work, or just trying to keep up with your busy day, 5 Hour Energy gives you that quick, refreshing pick-me-up whenever you need it. On-the-go convenience with 5 Hour Energy allows you to, when you're at a game or if you're traveling or if you're up late, it's easy to grab, keeps you feeling refreshed. Head to 5hourenergy.com and find over 15 flavors to choose from, including watermelon, blue raspberry, peach mango. You can even build your own 12-pack or 24-pack delivered right to your door. Need one right now? Well, just head to your local grocery or convenience store, grab a 5 Hour Energy. They are everywhere. Stock up today and stay energized with 5 Hour Energy.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the Bracket Breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Jayhawks your first listen every day. And again, don't forget to check out Locked On College Basketball right now. Get you ready for everything else going on around the country. So Josh Dix, sounds like he's visiting KU this weekend. We'll see if Bill Self can seal the deal and close the door on that one. But obviously a lot of competition for a player like this to find somewhere else. So immediate answer, is this a take? Yes, absolutely. The quick follow-up to that, though, is it an immediate take? Or is it a take based on role? Or is it a take based on, what somebody else decides? And I mean, in theory, if you had the option just in general to be like, Donovan Dent and Josh Dix, and you have to take the first one you want. I mean, at that point, I guess I'm going Donovan Dent. But like, if you're just talking about the wing position, right now, I think Josh Dix is the best available for KU, at least as a 2-3 wing, right? Again, if you want to count like Bryce Hopkins as a wing, as like a 3-4 wing, then maybe that's another discussion. But again, he has already kind of narrowed down his list, and that's not a possibility. So I think Josh Dix is the best one out there. And I think this is one where it's not just because you get in a little bit of trouble in the early part of the portal season. Teams are still playing out the rest of their season. The draft stuff still has to happen to where you get in a situation of like, what if you took a kid too early and then a better option comes up? And you don't want to be kicking yourself in that situation. I don't have that worry with Josh Dix. Like Josh Dix, no matter where it comes in the transfer portal, I would want him. I would want his floor spacing ability. I would want his competitiveness. I would want what he brings to the table and how it would fit in with Kansas. So, yeah, I mean, if you're talking about the kind of, I guess, best available for KU at the wing, I don't have any tier 1 possible star players, but I think Josh Dix is a tier 2, which is a most likely starter for KU, right? And I think you're at that point in time where you're talking about a guy who is that really good off-ball player. I don't worry about how he would fit next to Darryn Peterson. And yeah, even though it is in the back of your mind, like, how does Bill Self do with these players because of what we just saw with Rylan Griffin? Again, I've given you a longer list of players where it worked out okay, from Gradey Dick to Johnny Furphy to, Isaiah Moss, of guys who were shooters, but maybe they fit the team a little bit better, or maybe they were able to, in some form or fashion, figure it out with Bill Self. And I think Josh Dix, based on the things I've kind of seen about him and the competitive guy that he is and how much he does care about winning, I think he would just get along just fine. And I think he would come in and be kind of a perfect fit for KU. So I think this would be a home run get if KU can get him in the portal. That'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page. We'll be back at you this weekend if there's any breaking news of any commitments, players leaving, yada, yada, yada. More deep dives coming at you next week, more portal talk coming at you next week. Maybe we'll get some KU football. So make sure to subscribe to the show anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page. We'll see you next time for another edition of LOJ.